Hello, and welcome to Leave a Light On podcast, a show that looks to tackle the everyday struggles in our everyday lives. It's time to shed some light on it. Leave a Light On podcast is not a licensed mental health service and shouldn't be substituted for professional advice or treatment. Things discussed in this podcast are general in nature and may be of a sensitive nature. If you're struggling, please seek professional help or contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. Here's your hosts.
Yo, welcome to Leave a Light On podcast. We are back, baby.
Yeah, we're back. Took us a little while. We had a little break.
Yeah.
Hope everyone wasn't worried. We're okay.
Yeah,
we're here.
We're all good. We just we took a bit of extra time planning season 3 because we wanted to be bigger and better than ever.
We wanted to get it right.
Yeah, we wanted to get it right. So we're back. We're back, baby.
Just gone for a little while.
Yeah.
Had a little holiday.
Yeah, it's good. Well, welcome back, Mick.
Yes, good to see you,
Thank you very much.
Shane.
Yeah, good to see you. Always good to be back and doing what we love.
Back in the chair.
Yeah, we've had a few people say, when are we releasing again? And guess what? We're out again.
Yeah, we're back.
So we're back. Very, very cool and always excited. But today's really, really cool one, actually. We have a cool guest who's going to share their story as we always we do on this podcast, sharing stories of inspiration and triumph in the middle of some really trying circumstances.
Difficult.
So today's no different. But today is a little bit different in the fact that it's not a personal triumph, although it does translate into personal triumph. There's also a lot of external circumstances that affect that.
Yes.
It's not a personal story in terms of a personal, what's the way I'm looking at it? It's not something like, it's not, I didn't cause this,
Yes,
put it that way. It's not
right.
personally
It had nothing
caused.
to do with our guests.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory into today. So today's guest is the one and only Jim Hancock, 42-year-old male, residing in Rainbow Beach.
Yes, beautiful place.
Beautiful place. Residing in Rainbow Beach, Queensland. He had an incredible story. But today, as you will hear, the reason we have him on is because in 2005, which is this year's the 20th anniversary of that.
7th of July.
7th of July, for those of you who've been living under a rock would know, or wouldn't know, should I say. But in London, England, there was an incredibly huge catastrophic event that happened in 7th of July, and it's known as the London bombings in 2005. And it basically was a terrorist organization that detonated 4 different separate bombings, all within 1 hour of each other. 3 of those were on trains and 1 was on a bus. And the total casualty count of this particular event was 52 casualties. So 52 people died, unfortunately. But there were over 700 injuries or people that were affected by this, which is a huge number.
Massive.
Huge. And just to think that something like this could even happen is just, it's really...
Honestly, how many people are on the tube every day in London? I'm surprised there wasn't more.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's an incredible event.
Horrific as it is.
And so our guest, Jim Hancock, as you'll hear, was actually, he wasn't initially a primary involved individual. In fact, that he wasn't a survivor from one of the bombings. But Jim was actually in the vicinity of the Piccadilly Line bombing. And he happened to be in the area, and due to his obviously life, you'll hear, but he ends up getting involved in the incident. So we won't delve into it too much, and we won't spoil the story. But we're really excited for him to share his story and for you guys to hear how incredible it is that he got involved and some of the incredible work that he did. So without further ado, we want to give you the one and only Jim Hancock.
Watch the sound of silence.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We have Jim Hancock. Mr. Hancock, thank you very much, or Jimmy, as you would be called. Thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, you're joining us online, if I can put it that way. You're not in studio with us today, but thank you very much for carving out some time to be with us and to share your story with us, which is an incredible story. So thank you, Jim, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereabouts in the world are you joining us from again? Queensland?
Yeah, Queensland, small little town called Rainbow Beach at the end of the road, just next to Gary now. Used to be Fraser Island.
It sounds
nice.
it sounds pretty glorious, and I'm sure you're. It
is.
Yeah, you'd love it up there.
Yeah, we had some pretty good surf yesterday, as you guys in Newcastle are probably having at the moment. So it's a nice part of the world, and it's beautiful as well. So
yeah, I can imagine. Close to obviously Australia's beautiful Great Barrier Reef, obviously up there.
Yeah, a little bit further up the way. Fraser Island, Gary, the world's largest sand island, is not far away. I used to work over there as well as a guide before I went to Indonesia.
Yeah, you've actually lived a really incredible life when it comes to that kind of thing, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But for people who don't know you, let's give a brief rundown of who you are at this point in time, and what do you do?
Okay. Well, I've got my own business, a company called Empathy Herbal, and we focus on anti-inflammatory foods and supplements that support a healthy living and lifestyle. We focus on diet and lifestyle choices, things that I've learned over the past 20 years. And that's sort of where I'm at the moment. Before I became, a bit of an anti-inflammatory expert, I done a couple of winter seasons in the French Alps, in New Zealand, in Australia. Used to live in Indonesia for a year, South America for 6 months, Europe for 3 years. Used to work as a surf instructor in Europe. Work as a tour guide on Gari, on Kangaroo Island in Australia. So, yeah.
Yeah. How good.
Wow.
I mean, you've lived a life, eh?
Yeah, absolutely been around.
Yeah. Quick question. If anyone who hasn't been traveling is listening to this, what would your advice be for someone like that?
I'd go, like
Go
out and explore.
I mean, you grow, you become a lot more of a human, or you develop skills you would never have got if you just stayed inside your comfort zone, whether that's at home or even if it's a short holiday around Australia or to a place or location. Everything always works out. Like, life has a tendency to work out one way or the other, whether it's how you plan it or not. It's it moves forward, and you evolve and change and grow with every life experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And what made you get into this, obviously, industry that you're in now, that you're obviously talking about? You say you deal mainly with anti-inflammatories. What was the reason behind that?
Well, I mean, when I was 20 years old, like in my ultimate wisdom, I broke my patella by snowboarding into a tree. So
I don't know if I can actually have you say that on the podcast, because my wife is going to hate that. She's going to love hearing that, because she doesn't want me to do any of that kind of stuff, because she always goes, you're going to break a bone.
Yeah, you're going to break something for sure.
So thanks for just confirming her fears for me.
Well, I mean, you just... when you're young, like, we're a bit older now, like, we're not as stupid as we used to be. So
yeah, that's right.
I'd like to think.
Yeah,
anyway.
I was going to say, I beg to differ.
But yeah, I mean, so I've had 6 surgeries, and I've, had stem cells that are staph, and I kept waiting for, like, the big stem cell treatment's going to reverse arthritis, and, I'll be able to do everything I could, when I was younger. But, the older I got, the less likely that magic fix would come from, pharmaceutical, modern medicine advances. And, then I just got to a point where I was in Indonesia, and my knee swelled up. I just had my second lot of stem cell 3 months before. And I'm like, I thought everything was going to be fine, but I went surfing and surfed a lot the first day, and my knee swelled up, and I couldn't move really, and I couldn't surf, and the surf was epic, and my mates were getting sick waves, and I was like, man, this sucks. This is meant to be living a dream trip, and things meant to be better. It was like physically, for my body, but it didn't work out that way. And then that's when I learned about like jamu, which is like Indonesia's herbal medicine practices, and I started, combining them in my diet, looking at my diet, living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, which is, about meditation, breath work, yoga, exercise, putting all these things together to, in a package that, you're conscious about. And that's sort of how that was the big turning point in my life where I sort of thought, I'm getting better, my mobility's better, balance, I'm fitter, becoming fitter. And and that's sort of why it worked for me, so that, maybe it can work for other people. And that's sort of the long way of, how I got to becoming, and starting my business and focusing on anti-inflammatory, which, inflammation is the major cause of heart disease, diabetes, 9 of the most common conditions, cancer, like all this sort of stuff is linked to inflammation. And, your diet is a really natural way to, it's the power you've got.
I mean, we can't agree anymore.
100%.
It is. There's so many different things that you can do in order to sustain a healthy lifestyle. Breathwork is such a beautiful thing, like you say. Yoga, meditation, all of these just add to such healthy habits that we can do. And it doesn't even need to be in like massive doses. It can start off such small ones, and make such a huge difference in that. So kudos to you. Yeah, congratulations on that change, like you say, where you've made that conscious change and now even made it a career. So honestly, congratulations. That's amazing.
Very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't through choice, it was through necessity, and I happened to have a chronic injury early that sort of started me on that path where, other people, it's not so obvious, they might have, I've got a bit of cholesterol or a bit of high blood pressure, and they're like, it doesn't really affect their daily movement, so to speak, but they're just like, I'll just take this tablet, it's all right, and it's getting a bit worse, I'll just take a bit higher dose of this tablet, and then, well, that's the point where, some people think, okay, well, how can I not rely on this pharmaceutical treatment to live a healthy lifestyle? And that's where the breath work comes in, as you said. Simplest way to just relieve stress and anxiety. It's 3 deep breaths of a type, and that's great for your mental health space.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, there is so many reliances on pharmaceutical meds that sometimes, I mean, we see it. How often do people get addicted to things, or you start to feel like you can't live without these particular medicines or treatments, and they end up doing more harm than good sometimes.
Yeah. That side effects, you just say, okay, well, that's part of it, and it's it's a slippery slope, and but there's always a natural alternative that you just look at the way chronic disease has ridden us over the past decades. It's there's a cause to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's actually not what we've got you on to talk about. Funny enough, because we'll get into that a little bit later. But before we get there, just to give people a more holistic idea of what life looked like for young Jimmy when he grew up, can you tell us a little bit about what life was like for you growing up, Jim?
For me, it was pretty normal. I sort of, primary school, high school, played footy in the winter, cricket in the summer. I was a little bit bullied at primary school, but high school, luckily things turned around, and I sort of grew up, not affected negatively from my school experiences. And then I went to TAFE and sort of studied outdoor recreation and learned, a bit of first aid and fitness, and then I worked as a instructor for school kids, so teaching aquatics and bushwalking camps. And then I changed to become more into tourism because backpackers seemed a bit more fun when I was like 20 years old, and like they want to have more, you can have more banter with them. And, I sort of was working on sort of overnight 3-night trips on Kangaroo Island in South Australia, meeting all these amazing people, and they're like, oh yeah, we're traveling Australia. And it's like, I was really jealous that they were having all these amazing experiences traveling, and, I was helping to facilitate that experience on one part of Australia. But I thought, oh, mate, it's time for me to go overseas and, live the life that they were living.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, firstly, what a cool occupation to kind of get yourself into.
Meet heaps of different people.
Yeah, just you obviously interact with so many different people from all walks of life. But not only that, like, I feel like it's life skills that you learn when you do these kind of things. Like, it's so important, because I think sometimes we get so caught up on book knowledge and education that we tend to miss these incredible life skills that you can learn just in everyday life. But just, yeah, like you say, being an instructor in camps and things like that. What would you say was some of your biggest takes from that experience of being involved in those kind of environments?
Yeah, good question.
I like to ask good questions.
Yeah, exactly. For me, like, working with the school kids, like the high school kids, was like, they're just so, they're just starting to become humans, obviously, like, they're just starting to become adults, put the point.
Yes.
So they're developing personality and these sort of things, especially around age 10 or year 10. And so, yeah, just to try and be a good role model, I guess, for them was an important, working in that sort of dynamic with children. And then at like when I'd started tour guiding, it was more just like explaining things, having fun, having a sense of humour, a bit of banter. That was good. That was probably why I went to England, because that was the most, they've got this good sense of humour that we sort of share in Australia. So it's just trying to be entertaining, informative, and friendly.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so obviously we've said now that you spent a bit of time in Indonesia after you had completed all of these courses and these studies, and you'd done your instructing from the backpacker side of things. Gone to Indonesia, had a bit of fun in Indonesia for 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, from what you were telling me, and then hopped along to London. And that's kind of where we now get into, obviously, the gist of this podcast. So you were in London in 2005, and for someone who's just made that connection about why this could be a potential interesting fact, is because in 2005, London had an incredibly devastating attack occur. And the reason why we're interviewing you, one of the reasons why, is because you were actually at the forefront of this attack. Can I ask you a little bit about this situation? But what did life in London look like leading up to prior to this event on July 7th, 2005?
Yeah, for me, I just arrived there, been there like a week or so, and everything was new and fresh, and like it was summer and people were happy. And on the 6th of the 7th, England had just like been announced that they were going to hold the Olympics. So there was big parties and, everyone was happy. It was a really good environment to be in. And as a young traveller being overseas for the first time, it was the perfect time to be there.
Were there any warning signs prior to this beforehand? Did you notice anything out of the norm in terms of the environment or anything like that, or, your security or anything like that? Did you see anything that was just a red flag, if I can put it that way?
No, there was nothing like that. It was, the opposite. Everyone was happy. Everyone was, cheerful. Like they just got the Olympics. Everything was good. Like there was no indication of anything negative actually happening or occurring.
Yeah. And then, obviously, like I said, on July 7th, day after, such an incredible, obviously, iconic moment for London to receive the 2012 Olympic and get awarded that. On the 7th of July, at approximately 8:50 in the morning, there was 3 very devastating events that occurred at 8:50 in the morning that kind of rocked not only European public, but I think the world, because obviously seeing something like this happen to, at the time, probably global leaders, and they always have been global leaders when it comes to just how they, where they sit in terms of the hierarchy in the world. But there were three simultaneous explosions in the London Underground that occurred at 8:50 in the morning by Islamic terrorists organization that had been planning this for quite some time, apparently. But the reason why this is so personal to you is because you were actually in the vicinity of one of these explosions.
Yeah, correct. I was in between. I was staying in a hostel in London between King's Cross and Russell Square, and had a job interview to go to the morning of the 7th, and that's sort of how I ended up at the station after the bomb had exploded. And that's sort of, it was by accident that I ended up sort of being there.
Yeah, so there were 3 different explosions, as you said, Liverpool Street, Aldgate Station, and then on the Circular Line, which was Edgware Road and Piccadilly Line, as we said, which is the Piccadilly Line is the one that you're referring to, where you were fairly close because you were saying you were at King's Cross. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it happened between the King's Cross and the Russell Square, I guess I woke up in the morning because I had a job interview to go to and wasn't too sure, not the night before I planned my trip, because back then they didn't have internet on phones. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the Russell Square end because it's a smaller tube station. It should be easier to find the right tube and to get to the job interview, which I had, which funny enough was for a job in the French Alps as a chalet host. So it was, it was pretty exciting. I definitely didn't want to be late or miss my tube. So I planned it well. Sort of walked out the hostel door and turned left and went to the Russell Square tube and got there probably 10 minutes after the bomb had happened. When I got there, the tube station was closed, so I couldn't, the tubes weren't running. So I'm like, oh, great, how do I get to my interview? And before internet, I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to my interview. I didn't even know how to call them to say that I wouldn't be there. So I just sort of asked the ticket seller who was standing in front of the gates that were closed, like, do you need like a first aid, or do you need, any help? Because the people who were inside, they weren't really injured, but they were definitely vague, or there was definitely something wrong. Like some people were really dirty, other people were just like, they were just standing around like in shell shock. I could sense that. So I went in and sort of, that's where I started helping. Initially it was me, and then there was another Kiwi girl in there as well who sort of had some first aid training. And then after a little bit, some nurses and some doctors ran down from a nearby hospital. And we were we had the station for probably the first hour or so before really paramedics and, enough staff or enough, trained experts came to be able to, treat the people that were injured there and start evacuating them to hospitals and getting them the help they needed.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you were tasked with doing? Obviously, you were saying you were doing some first aid and stuff like that. What did this first aid look like? Was it just on minor cases? Was it just on people that were coming through from the actual tunnels where the train explosions that happened? What were some of these kind of cases that you were dealing with?
So like initially it was more just like chatting to people, say, hey, you're okay, like what happened? Like, oh, there was a crash. And I was like, okay, well, you're all right, you're up here now. Like, just been trying to be reassuring as possible for the first, 10, 15 minutes. And then the longer it went on, the more, severe it became. Like, people come up with bigger cuts or bigger scratches and, so initially it was just, conversations and then it wasn't until later on that, the people were missing limbs and bigger scratches and, I didn't do, luckily I never had to do first aid, like CPR, but the doctors were doing that and there were some nurses there and I just sort of tried to, stick within my lane and what I felt comfortable, what I could do best, which was, bandaging little scratches and cuts. And, there was one guy who had a pretty bad injury on his foot and me and the Kiwi chick, she had first aid. We sort of helped him to bandage that and looked after him, and his shirt was ripped open. And so I, in my ultimate wisdom of first aid, I took his tie off around his neck and wrapped it around his chest so he would sort of try and stay warm. It was really just a bit of a hodgepodge at that point. And I think that's probably why that they took a photo of him walking out of the station later on, because he looked a little bit,
worse for wear.
Bit funny.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, your particular explosion, like you say, the Piccadilly one, was actually the explosion that had the most casualties. So it would have been a pretty devastating kind of scene to be part of, even if you were, like you say, dealing with just the minor ones.
Minor stuff, yeah.
It would have been pretty chaotic.
And you also turned up with nothing to help them with. You didn't have your little first aid pack in the back of your bucket in your handbag, did you?
Nah, nothing. I mean, there was nothing there until the nurses and doctors arrived. So luckily there wasn't anybody there that needed anything major. It was just like a little simple first aid kit at the station. Luckily they brought some supplies and were there in time for the major people. Once I tried to I ran down the stairs carrying some water and a few supplies that we basically had to try and go to the train to help people off of the train, because the people that had come out first had walked past the carriage that had got bombed, and they were like, there's some sick people down there that really need help. So I sort of ran down the steps to try and, get down there and to help get people up to, the doctors that were there that could do, had, obviously a lot more skills than what I had to. But when I got down the bottom, it was really eerie. It was like super warm and dusty, and it was silent and it was spooky. I ran it was, and there was some police officers standing at the edge of the tube, and I was like, I want to go and help, and they're like, no, you can't go down there. Like,
There's an interesting fact on that as well, is that the reason why I think that they stopped the initial first responders from going without prior clearance is because apparently what they were saying is that at the time, the IRA, which was the organization that claimed the bombings, what they would do is they would ignite the original bombing, but there would be a secondary bomb that would be then done later, detonated later, once first responders were on the scene. So it was actually the major bomb, or the intentional one that they wanted was the second one, because they wanted to get the first responders. And I think that's like you're saying, why the police were standoffish and saying, no, we don't want anyone going down there, is because at the time they weren't sure if there was a second device.
What's happening,
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, and also from watching the documentaries that have come out, I think you've watched maybe one or two as well, the people that were at the scene, that crime scene, and going through it all after, they said it was horrific, 23 people dead, in bits and pieces all over everywhere. I feel essentially it was a good thing that I wasn't able to go down and witness that scene, seeing people missing arms and legs and getting CPR done up the top was enough to not to be traumatized from it, let alone witnessing all that, that mess.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in terms of what that looked like for you. So you're obviously in the middle of all this situation, and obviously things started to maybe stabilize as you so referred. What did that look like for you then in that situation once things had started to kind of stabilize? First responders had taken the scene. And
what did you do?
What did it look like for you?
So before the first aid arrived, like the proper first, like the paramedics and all that arrived, there's probably like 5 or 6 people critically injured that were there, but they're missing a limb in one way, shape or another. And I sort of stayed with one lady and just would chatting to her, making sure that she stayed conscious and just trying to take her mind off the fact that she's got no leg now, and just trying to, not to keep it light, I guess. There's nothing that I can do. Like, her leg's been, they've got a tourniquet around her leg, so she's not bleeding too much. That's the main injury. So it was more just, keeping her company. So that, because paramedics would arrive. I think it was just they took so long because of, King's Cross was probably got prioritised more because for it being a bigger station, and then there was the bus, and then there was all the other tubes as well. So that's probably why it took so long. Then once they did arrive, it's funny you mentioned about the IRA, because police had to clear the station. They thought there was another bomb outside in a car or under a car. That's something they couldn't identify. So they cleared the station of all the people that were not critically injured. So that was the fella that I helped with a sore foot and, initially helped. And then the people that were just sort of standing around there in shell shock, didn't know where to do, what to do, how to leave. So they cleared them out. And then the people with first aid training, we went back in and, stayed there until the ambulance beds and hospital beds had been brought down to safely evacuate these people to get the medical treatment that they needed.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, obviously the trains were not the only affected things. There was obviously an hour later, after the trains had been detonated, there was a bus bomb that had gone off an hour later that had devastating effects as well. I think, and I think that might be, like trying to get people as they find other means of transport. So that was sort of a little bit of that same tactic, I guess, that the perpetrators used. Yeah. There's so many interesting facts when I did some research behind this. Even with the bus bombing, I mentioned to you before we started recording this, is that the initial bomber actually wasn't meant to be on that bus in the first place. He was supposed to be on a train like the other 3 were. And he actually ended up missing his train and ended up then being on a bus. And so that was also why it was an hour later. Because in those stages, obviously cell phones were pretty new, like you say. There wasn't much internet going around. And so the communication wouldn't have been on point with them. But even the reports were saying that they were worried that these particular bombs, they didn't know that the actual bombers had detonated, and they thought they might have been remotely detonated with cell phone signals.
Yep.
And that they didn't know if there was any others, because even on the bus one, apparently there was a police officer that said there was a suspicious bag that was on the bus still that they were worried was a secondary device.
Yeah, well.
So like you say, there was just so much unknown in this particular circumstance. It's not like things are today. Hey,
no, the information wasn't getting out as quickly.
Yeah. So
100%.
Yeah, it would have been an incredible situation to be part of, like you say, where you just, to me, it's just mind blowing to think that you just was like, how can I help? Because the initial reaction for most people would probably be, I need to get to safety. Unless you're involved in first responding somewhere, I think most people's survival instinct kicks in and goes, okay,
I need to get out of here.
Yeah, it's the flight situation rather than the fight situation, So I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, I sort of like, well, I had that first aid training when I did after high school, and then I had the surf instructing, like life-saving, like first aid sort of stuff. So, and I didn't feel like I was in danger or there was any reason to, be fearful. It was more just like, compassionate, oh man, these people look like they need help, and I felt like I could help. So it really wasn't a calculated decision. It was just like, oh well, what can I do, And then at the end of it, it was like, like after 2 hours or 2 and a bit hours, they cleared everything out, and it was difficult to just like walk away from the involvement or watching, like witnessing these major injuries, and like, how do you digest it? How do you process all those experiences, what you've seen? So I sort of couldn't walk away. And I think that's why lots of people in the tube station, it was full, because people didn't know how to leave, like once you sort of were in there, you couldn't go, like you were sort of, all shell-shocked. And the thing, all the people up the top, they'd walk past the carriage, and they'd sort of seen how devastating it was, So they saw the worst of it. So they've got up the top like, whoa, like, what's going on? And to walk outside, like, I don't, yeah.
I mean...
sorry, back to like, I couldn't walk away. So I ended up picking up bits of rubbish and cleaning up and stuff like that at the tube station after, like, up the top. Just, with some other people there, we were just sort of, tried to, we just couldn't walk away. And luckily I did stick around and help out, because that's when I got to chatting with some of the other nurses that were there. And that was a big part of the recovery of talking about it with other people that knew the experience that I'd gone through. They'd also shared that experience or witnessed those things. So that was a big part of the recovery process afterwards, of just, talking, like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at that, because obviously this kind of event would have, huge kind of impact on your psyche, your mental health, your the way you think, the way you feel. What are some of the tools that you found were really helpful when it came to processing, first of all, what you had done and what you had walked through, and then secondly, dealing with emotions, feelings, thoughts, memories of such a traumatic event?
So I guess, like, directly afterwards, it was just more about, like, just talking, like, just opening up and having someone else literally understand what you're saying and, like, how you feel, because they've already been there, they've walked that step, as opposed to talking to someone who didn't have that experience. So that was the immediate helpful bit. After that, then I was a bit claustrophobic. I couldn't be inside. Like, I went back to my hostel, and they're like, you got to stay in here. You can't go outside, because we need to account for who's here and who's not. So that was a really an event that, like, I sort of was, I needed to get outside. They wouldn't let me get outside, so I almost, I didn't want to hurt myself or anything like that, but I almost jumped out a window of the hostel just to get space. The only reason I didn't, because it was raining, and I didn't want to hurt myself. It was just like, I just needed to be out, and that sort of was what led me, the following weeks, months, years afterwards, is just to be out, to, not get stuck inside a home or an office, or just adventure, travel, be outdoors, and that, because I guess I saw how quickly, how fragile life is, that it can be taken from you. You could be walking one day, then not the next. Like, it's sort of, life's upside down. And I didn't want to look at the newspapers. I just sort of wanted to distance myself from it. I never found out who of the people that got brought up survived and who didn't, if any of them did. I'm sure they did, but I don't know if, unfortunately I never got that closure, and I wanted to sort of not
Yeah.
look at the news, not look at events like that. I tried to be, I was a bit like, you know what, I don't want to deal with if there was another bombing in like the Madrid train or other stuff since then. I'm like, no, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. Because of the fact that, like following it, there was the guy I helped with the missing foot. Well, the guy I helped following it. There was a photo taken of him and it was published in the newspaper. And the newspaper or the guy who took the photo, erased one of his feet from the image. So I was pretty very angry first journalist I came across after buying that newspaper, and I fully blew up at him, and I was like, really angry, not violent, but just really angry. And he's like, man, I didn't take the photo. I empathise with you feeling this way, but it was just a little bit of a distrust of the media as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, often you hear of moments where media have misinterpreted, or that their job is to obviously report on the media or circumstances that have transpired, and I think sometimes they tend to try and make it more than what it is in order to sell copies, sell copies, or get the ratings that they need. So. Absolutely. I 100% understand your frustration and your disappointment in that aspect. Do you feel in that moment there was more that you're dealing with than just the distrust of the media in terms of how you were feeling and processing the information and the situation that you just walked through, rather than the fact that this picture was misinterpreted?
So, I mean, I guess it's just an overload of the senses that, at the time. And it was more later on upon reflecting and that I sort of did distrust the reporting of it, I guess, let's put it that way. But, directly after it was more focused on, getting out of London and getting back to the coast and going surfing again, because that was a big part of my recovery. And 2 weeks afterwards there were some more bombings that these other guys tried to do it again, but their bombs failed, fortunately. And I remember Mum calling me 2 weeks later saying, "Oh, it's happened again." I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't care. Not the fact I don't care. No, it's not it. It was more like for my mental health, I need to disconnect from that experience and move on and put it to the back of your mind for as long as I could. And then, it wasn't until later on in life that, you have to sort of deal with these traumas that happen for me, it was that pretty major event, but for other people it could be, being bullied at school, could be something when you're a kid, it can be anything, bullied at work, or, tripping over, breaking your leg, anything. It could, we all have these traumas and they have to be resolved at some point. So it was a lot later on that I sort of started addressing those things, and that's where the breath work, the meditation, the yoga and all that sort of stuff became really helpful.
Yeah, it's a processing mechanism, I think, where we tend to suppress rather than we tend to process. And that's something that I think we need to learn as a society, that suppressing something doesn't help, but processing something does.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I mean, and then that's taken 20 years for this philosophy or mentality to become more forefront. But back then it was like move forward, not just go on.
No. Because even back 20 years ago,
go on. Yes.
Sorry, going back 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been any of those support lines or like Lifeline or anything like that would have been over there for you, or to be the same degree as they are now to be able to help you. Like, you literally left that circumstance that afternoon when that was, you left the train station and went home, and there was probably, went back to the hostel, and there's only the people to talk there, and there was no one probably to help you, in that initial first stages, where now if that happened now, you'd be able, there'd be a lot of more services available to be able to help you through that initial process.
Yeah, 100%. You're right there. Like, I don't have any contacts from anyone else that was there. Like back then, it was only email, and I don't have. You know, I'd love to be able to contact some of the nurses I work with, or even some of the patients are there. You know, being in Australia and it happening over there. You know, so far away, and you know, I think that was a bit difficult to move on because I didn't have that closure from it. I just had those conversations following the event to sort of help move forward, but not to bring, you know, not to resolve that sort of the underlying questions that I had, you know, later on.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, and I'll end with this question with you, Jim, is that looking back now and knowing what you know, what would your advice to someone who is walking through a very traumatic experience in their life, what would your advice to these people or that person be?
Yeah, you gotta sort of look at the bigger picture. Quite often we can get too caught up in, you know, looking at the problem too closely. So you need to take a step back and just evaluate, you know, the bigger picture, whether it's like, you know, does that make sense? I don't know if I put it pretty well, but you know, like you just need to not get so caught up in the problem and then take a step back, and then the solution will present itself. You know, like I think about, you know, people that have PTSD, like it was a terrorist attack, a bombing. So these are like the guys that go to veterans that, you know, now luckily get all the support that they need. Yeah, sorry, I went off track there. Maybe I just cut it out. But like, yeah, I guess it's like, I don't know. Does that make sense? How can I say that better?
No, I kind of think to myself, I can't remember who it was, but they did this experiment where there's an ant on a piece of paper, and the ant is free to roam around on this piece of paper. There's no hindrances on this piece of paper. But what the individual does is they take a pen and they draw a circle around the ant, and the ant will not cross that line. It'll stay within the parameters of that circle, even though there isn't a physical boundary. This line that you've drawn on this piece of paper confines this ant. And what happens is it'll eventually obviously just stay within this confinements of this circle. And then what they did is they took a spider and they did the same thing with the spider. And the spider was on the piece of paper and they drew a circle around the spider, and the same thing. The spider was confined within this circle. Even though there wasn't a physical barrier, it wouldn't step over the line of the circle. And what they did is they then decided to take it a step further, and they made the circle smaller. And again, the wouldn't move out of the circle. But eventually what happened is it became so small that the spider couldn't function within the circle, and it walked, it broke the line of this that was drawn, the smaller one. But then the interesting thing then about that is that the spider then would never be confined to a circle again after this. So you would take another blank piece of paper and you would draw a circle around it, and it would ignore the circle, because it realized that there wasn't a barrier there anymore, that this thing that it had been so scared of in the initial thing that had confined it and kept it restrained was actually not real. It was a figment of its imagination. And once it had realized that, it could never be restrained again in that same thing. And I think that's what you're trying to say, is that we tend to restrain ourselves when it comes to these traumatic experiences, and we draw these circles of limitations around us where we tend to feel claustrophobic and can only see within this confinements of where we're at. Once you start to look past that and break out and realize that these confinements are just figments of our imagination or limitations that we're placing on ourselves, we start to realize that there is more, that these things can't hold us back. And I think, from my understanding anyway, that's kind of what you're trying to say in this situation, is that it's not about looking within in these situations and going, how can I deal with it? But let's look outside of the situation and say, let's expand the limitations. This particular event hasn't defined who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So the event hasn't defined. It's just given me, a learning curve, a learning experience. It's not the experience that I imagined when I first went to London, but it's definitely given me helped me to learn more skills in mental health, and it was like following that, like mum and dad, like, oh, just come home, come home to Australia, it's safe. I'm like, nah, I'm not coming home, and I didn't go home for 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm staying away. It's not like, if this is as bad as it can get, then it's not that bad. I mean, luckily for me, it wasn't that bad, but I agree, whether you've had an injury or something like that, it's like people tend to go in their shell. Like, it's like, oh, I broke my knee, I've got to be careful. I shouldn't play sport, or I shouldn't do this activity. But in actual fact, the only way you're going to beat arthritis is by doing small activities every day. The only way you're going to beat mental health is by doing little breath work, doing meditation, doing these little things every day, and then small habits to build up to become life-changing, habit skills. And then you can, roam the bit of paper wherever you like, or all the other bits of paper. It's all about taking the positive out of a negative, essentially, and breaking those barriers, which is the circle around the spider or the ant.
Well, I mean, couldn't have put it any better, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're sharing, obviously, what was a very traumatic event, and a huge event in history, and sharing your perspective and your personal journey in that, and personal journey of progression through that and past that. So from us here, we want to say thank you so much for sharing and having that ability to share that, and also just your perspective on life after something traumatic. So thank you so much. We really appreciate that, Jim.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, boys. Everything happens for a reason. You're doing this podcast to help other people, and they're going to listen to this and at the right time when they need to hear it. And hopefully, the work that you do and the work I've done today can help, them when they need it. And everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And then if anyone wants to get hold of you in terms of find out more information, do you want to shout out to any of your socials, anything like that, Jim?
Yep. Empathy Herbal is my band, my brand, my business. It's, it's empathy is the medicine the world needs. It's sort of why I want to help that day, why other people help that day. It's, why I want to offer expertise and help where I can. Empathy Herbal.
Empathy Herbal. Awesome. Well, Jim, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best. And thank you for joining our community on Live a Light On podcast. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you, boys. You do a great job. Appreciate being on here.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Jim.
Jim.
You keep well, and we'll chat to you soon.
Hey, thanks for listening. We hope you managed to gain some insight from today's episode. Jump onto our socials and reach out. And until next time, wherever you are, let's leave a light on.